Your rig is where you work, where you rock out. Your rig is your livelihood. So when that DPF light comes on, give your rig the respect it deserves. As for Road Warrior, stronger seals, better manufacturing, and it's made of metal that lasts. Less downtime and more miles on the road so you can haul longer. Respect the rig. Become a Road Warrior.
Welcome to The Long Haul, the podcast dedicated to empowering small carriers and owner-operators to drive their business forward. I'm your host, Adam Wingfield, bringing you insights from industry leaders, real-world success stories, and strategies to help you navigate the road to profitability. Whether you're just getting started or looking to take your fleet to the next level, this is a show where trucking meets opportunity. So buckle up, it's time to go the distance. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Long Haul, the show where we really talk about what's really happening behind the walls of freight. Today's conversation is one we need to have because fraud isn't something that is in the background anymore. It's a full-blown epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it. Cargo theft's up, scammers are getting smarter and smarter, and even the legit carriers are getting caught in the crossfire. My guest today knows the freight game inside and out. She's known as the fraud girl, and I asked her twice about that too, and that's her moniker. She's a former broker, a fraud prevention expert, and the host of the Tell Me Everything podcast from Gainesville, Georgia. She's also with Descartes' MyCarrierPortal, where she helps companies vet carriers and fight back against the fraud network that's bleeding this industry dry. We're going to talk about her recent ride-along with the California Highway Patrol's Cargo Theft Task Force, what she saw firsthand, what small carriers can learn from the tactics these thieves are using. But before we do all that, I need you to do me a favor. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Long Haul. And then make sure you go to freightwavesplaybook.com to join our newsletter where we break down the stories behind the stats every single week. Welcome to the show, none other than Danielle Spinelli. Welcome to the show today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I feel honored to have another podcaster on a podcast. So we got a podcaster talking to a podcaster on a podcast about a podcast.
I love that. So many podcasting.
I know it's something else, right? All right. So before we get into all of the good stuff, I want to roll back to before you became the fraud prevention expert, before, you really been a active voice in the community in regards to fraud. You spent 8 years in the trenches as a broker. And What did you see during those early years that made you realize that fraud was more than just a few bad actors?
Yeah, so I specialized in copper and electrical wire, and I did southeast to northeast, southeast to Midwest. Those were my lanes. I was a carrier sales rep, for 8 years. I also did a little bit of postal in the very beginning and then switched over to more of the high value stuff. And back then it was a lot of straight theft. So a lot of the drivers we had to really prepare the drivers. Hey, you're handling high value freight. Be careful when you stop at truck stops, back up against something. I even had a driver get, an armed person try to steal his truck from him. So, it was way more straight theft at that point. And kind of seeing the roller coasters of the waves of the market, doing that for 8 years. So seeing whenever the market gets tighter or copper goes up in pricing and kind of how that whole thing was, I knew at that point, that's when my risk was tighter. I had to be a little bit better about vetting carriers, especially whenever it was, a tighter market. I had a harder time finding a carrier to do the rate I needed. That's a lot of times where the bad guys kind of came in. So it's always kind of been like that on the straight theft side. But the strategic theft or the, fraud part of it kind of really came in 2020 whenever we all got sent home. And at that time, honestly, I was posting things to my email at that point. I wasn't really having the same relationships or phone conversations I used to have. A lot of it was just via email and posting and flipping lows back and forth. And we were slammed at that point. So it took a big turn. I saw firsthand about, like I said, around 2020, really escalated in about 2022 of really just these bad actors out there trying to double broker or deceive themselves as a different carrier. back then that was when FMCSA was getting hacked and they're able to change the contact information. So a lot of the regular verification steps that I had in place, because we had a long checklist I had to go through.
Right.
And so all the things that we had in place were getting compromised. So even the steps we had we were having to adapt to. So that's kind of why we started using MyCarrierPortal. I was able to really streamline a lot of the little checks, because I, wake up in the middle of the night like, oh my God, did I forget to check this one thing? And is this the load that's going to get stolen because I forgot this one thing? So I was able to that software was able to help us a lot. So that's kind of why I came on board with them, was because I knew how much it impacted me as a rep. It really changed, was a game changer for me. So with that, now that I'm part of the tech side of things, able to really see what I learned front lines and what we can put into a product to make it be where we can, make things automatic, if I can talk. And also just hearing still nowadays, jumping in with customers, like going on the front lines, taking phone calls, seeing what they're hearing. Any type of theft story that I hear, I like to know all the details to see what we can do, because that's really how we learn and stay ahead of things.
So, like, you talked about 2020 is when you saw like the big kick of just things just start happening. And there's an interesting graph that I looked at a couple of days ago, like 2019, 2018, 2017, 2021, 2022, 2023. There always a little bit in terms of the data behind it. There was normalcy in terms of the amount of drivers that were added to the CDL registry. 2020 went nuts. Like, it went absolutely, the roof just like exploded off of that. And then you're saying, and for what you're saying as well, you also saw the biggest uptick in fraud happen during that one time frame. Do you think there's a correlation between that?
I think yes, but also I think really it was that everybody was sent home, and these bad guys that were doing the straight theft before, either they went back home to be with their families during COVID because they were, too scared to leave them alone type thing. And that they've realized, we can operate and do all these bad things from overseas now. Because that's where a lot of the stuff that's happening now is they're overseas. They're not here in the U.S. There's definitely bad actors in the U.S. too, but it's kind of everywhere now. So I think really we were sending a lot of even like dispatching services overseas. And so those type of people didn't really have the same type of jobs that they had previously, but they knew the industry in and out. So however, they all kind of kumbaya'd and got together, and all the scamsters, on the dark web or whatever, they were giving tips and going back and forth because they knew the industry. I mean, I remember one of the scams that got me was a double brokering thing. And it was where, because at the time at my shipper, they were doing fingerprints and all that stuff. So they had a legitimate driver pick up the load, cross-dock it, move it again, cross-dock it again, and we're trying to get it to go, over the border. Luckily, we found the real driver, and the driver wasn't in on it, so he was willing to help us. But yeah, I mean, they're getting really very just all across the board doing so many different things. So it's hard to just nail it in one spot or the other. But I mean, I definitely think the influx was everybody, like I said, was just posting and able to cover quickly. So.
You've been really vocal about the evolution of scams, just kind of watching some of your content, had the opportunity to see some of your podcast content. And you talked about you talk about evolution, and from old school double brokering to sophisticated cyber theft. I mean, that's realistically probably where we're at. When did you start seeing that shift? What do you think triggered it? Now you just what was like kind of like, okay, COVID, they got to be at home, and now they're starting to think, was that the shift that you think that you started seeing that to become more complex?
More of the cybersecurity, I would say, started in 2022, 2023. I think at the beginning, it was where they were having the change in the FMCSA data to whatever email address they created, or maybe having like an LLC added or something simple like that. But it was their email addresses. Then they got more into the phishing attempts. And really getting into a carrier's email, and then totally taking over, their bank account. They were taking over everything. What? So it was more than even just loads. Yeah. And so that started really, I think 2022, 2023 is whenever I saw the biggest uptick in that. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know how they're figuring this all out, but I know one of my customers was actually like, yeah, we hired a private investigator, and on the dark web, you can buy these manuscripts on how to attack, like either like on a cyber front or, something like that. So it's wild.
The thing is like when it comes down to it, and that's one of the things that I worry about the industry. I've been in this industry a very long time, going on 26 years. And one of the things I can tell you about the trucking industry is so antiquated. Like we're such a reactive industry. Like we're reacting to fraud. We're reacting to sophisticated cyber fraud now. But like we've had technology in the environment for years now. We weren't being proactive about it. So some of these things are, I hate to say it, some of these things are just a reflection of our own lack of action. Wouldn't you agree?
Totally. Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of, especially the cybersecurity side, a lot of that is they're really attacking the smaller fleets that do not have a IT department, that are not giving the cybersecurity education like you are at a bigger company. So they're really taking advantage of those guys, sending an emails, posing as, let's say, MyCarrierPortal, and saying that someone is sending them a link to the onboard, they click it and they log in, and then there they go. Once they're in one thing, they're able to go in whatever. So it's knowing that cybersecurity health, and that's kind of the biggest message, I guess, that I've had, is I'm wanting that to get across no matter what size company you are, and if you have an IT group or not. And luckily, there's a lot of other organizations that are doing the same thing, trying to educate, because that's really where the problem's at, is not knowing what's out there and what's going on.
So let's talk about, let's move a little bit. Let's talk about that ride along that you did. Like, so you did a ride along with the California Highway Patrol Cargo Theft Task Force. What did you see out there that surprised you? Like, what was that thing like, damn, they do this too? Like, what would have been that moment?
It was such a wild ride, honestly. So in the beginning, just driving out. So very beginning, we go into their office, and it's like a detective office, not at a main precinct. They're kind of hidden off the ways, but they do a lot of like investigative work on whatever they're working on. What we were working on is a house that was right along the rail lines that they're kind of using as like a stash house. They're grabbing these, the freight, taking them off, moving it into this house, and then moving it along. So they had an insider tip saying that. So our thing we were doing that day was walking along the tracks, driving along, trying to get as much information as we can about that place. So who's staying there, who are the bad actors there, or if that's really happening, because it was kind of just a tip that they got. So we went out to the desert and, walked the rail lines. And what was the most insane thing to me is each step I took, I looked down and there's a broken seal. And I'm not kidding. Every step I took.
Wow.
I was like, I knew it was bad, but I never, ever would have thought it was that bad, especially on the rail. I don't think that's talked about enough. It is. And then along each side of the banks, I mean, just boxes, empty boxes everywhere you looked. It was wild.
And we all seen the headlines about it. Like you see it in Chicago too, because you see the headlines. You see the little TikToks or where they show the train sitting on the track and people going ham. They go into the back of it, they cutting it, they getting the TVs out, the whole nine. Like, what's really happening in those rail lines? Like, how big is that problem in compared to what we may see? Like, because you just talked about something that that doesn't get as much news attention as maybe it should.
Right. So from the stats that I've heard, it's about 180 different thefts per day is on average of just rail. That's throughout the whole U.S. I know. I would say the majority of that is in California because they have, basically a 100-mile stretch of desert that's very desolate. There's only 2 rail police that handle all 100 miles. And so they can just, it's basically an open target, and they've made these arrests on people. They're in and out. They usually make bail that same day and they're back out doing the same thing again. There's really no, hard time for that at all, because it's considered a nonviolent crime. So they're really in and out. It doesn't affect them to make X amount of dollars. And unfortunately as well, what I've been learning about that is it's not even somebody who's taking the money them for themselves. A lot of this is like a organized ring grabbing these people, and prior to like the borders being open, they were bringing them across and kind of as a stipulation of like, hey, the reason why you're entering America is you got to do this kind of to pay your way through. And that was cargo theft. And so now that the borders are shut, now what the rail police taught me was that now they're going back to the people that they brought in like 2-3 years ago, saying, hey, we let you back in, we know you did this, but now you got to do it again, or we'll like kidnap your family members and stuff like that. So it is the rail part of everything was way more than what is at all being talked about. I can't find anything that's this spoken about. Like there's articles out there, but it's nothing like in your face, because it is scary.
So you had criminals that were taking advantage of immigration lapses in immigration by putting them to do the dirty work, out there in exchange for, I wouldn't even call it citizenship, but I mean, I guess that you would have to
Right.
call it
Bring them
somewhere.
across somehow. Right.
So your job, I'm gonna bring you across. You're gonna go out here in the middle of the desert. You're gonna take care of business, and then you good after that. So it's kind of like that's insane. That's insane.
It's insane.
And
it is
so,
literally insane. Like, I can't believe this is not headline news.
were there any patterns that you saw that like carriers should be looking at? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I know, like, and I'm gonna come back to the rail side of it, because I think that was, you got hundreds of miles of desolate space, and you got one or two patrol officers that are let me ask you. So would they just hijack the train, or would they wait till the trains? What would that look like? Are they waiting in the train and like?
So they'll either hop on at the port, or they'll wait till there's like a slow time where either the rails are going really slow or uphill or something, so they're able to just jump on. Mm-hmm. Then they ride the train and they go on each car and pop different cars. They'll pop the seals and look inside, see if it's anything that they want. If it is, they do close everything back up, because there are cameras that are watching those rails as they pass. And if there's they have like AI detection now, where if there's any alerts that the doors are open, they go back out there and shut that down. But so they shut everything back out. They signify it with a shoestring, I guess, knowing that this is the car that we want. Once they know, hey, I have either buyers lined up, or hey, I have enough freight on here where I know I can make my profit that I want, they'll either from one of the rail lines ahead of them, so like a train ahead, they'll either start a fire on the train, they'll cut brake lines, airlines, whatever it is to make that a train ahead of them stop, which then delays everything else behind that. And they'll hit usually multiple different rails or trains at that point. And for the police officers, they're thinking, oh, it's probably the one that they set a fire to or something like that. But it's not. It's one of the ones behind there. And so there's so many different trains at one time. So they don't even know where to go. And even as like a conductor, them walking the tracks, which I can't even imagine how dangerous that is, but them walking the tracks and seeing if there's anything going on with their train. They're having to walk sometimes a whole mile to get to the end of it. So at that point, by the time they get all the way to the end, these guys are long gone. So it's crazy.
Setting fire to a rail car just so I can get into it is pretty extreme. Did you notice, and you talked about the seals, are they like the seals that you see on the back of a dry van where you're just going to cut the plastic seals, or do they have wire seals?
They have bolt seals, wire seals, tag seals, all those types of things. Doesn't matter. They bring out the metal cutter things and cut off whatever they need to. I mean, they don't care. They're going to get in there, and they have enough time to do it. They have, like I said, hundreds of miles to be able to, or 100 miles plus in the desert, where they can kind of do whatever they need to and know if this is worth their time or not. So it's crazy. Is
it a big organization, or do you believe that it's kind of like, segmented into smaller, microcosms?
I think it's one big organizations that are hiring these guys. There may be some smaller bad actors that kind of learned from that as well and are also jumping in. But I think the majority of the big hits are from one big organization that are taking advantage of these, immigrants or, whoever they can. Maybe somebody that just is on their bad luck and they can get them and throw money at them. I don't know. So
that's absolutely crazy. Because I can sit on this railroad thing. I think that's wild. And so that entire task force, their focus was on rail, like totally just the rail side.
The rail police. The Union Pacific has their own police for their lines or their rail lines, whatever. Then there's the BNSF, so that's who have like the two that handle that whole area. And then there's the California Highway Patrol, the Cargo Theft Task Force, who handle all of Southern California, the ones that I met with. There's 4 guys, technically really only 2 that actually do investigations. And then there's one, I guess Sergeant is his name. I don't really know all the levels of police officer.
I got you.
But they handle from rail stuff, and then they also handle just regular cargo theft. And we all know how bad cargo theft is, even at the ports or getting hit. I mean, they handle all of it. So they're chasing all sorts of different types of theft. And if we could get more help for them to do I mean, just like what we're dealing with on the transportation side, just over the road trucks or things like that. I mean, that alone should keep them busy. But because there's not, the only way that they even have funding is because there's people that went to City Hall and said basically for them to add $3 on to CDL registrations, or maybe it's not CDLs, it's maybe be like the commercial vehicle registration or something. It's like $3 extra. All that money just goes towards those task force. But that's the only way that even started.
Today's episode is brought to you by Trucking Hub. Now listen, if you're still bouncing between 5 different logins just to run your trucking business, you're already behind. Trucking Hub is built by a carrier for carriers, and it puts everything under one roof, whether it be dispatch, safety, maintenance, and even accountant and a driver app. Their dispatch runs on PC Miler and Copilot navigation, so the miles are right the first time. Now the ELD is FMCSA certified, tamper-proof, and trusted since 2017. And if you want to keep it all in one lane, you can even roll in company phones, text and video, and fax backed by nationwide LTE. Bottom line, this is the kind of system that's you spend less time hopping and more time hauling. Plans start at just $29 per truck, no contracts, no hidden fees, and you can try it for free for 30 days. Check them out at their website and get your time back. So there's really no there's no funding to stop it, which you would think that it would, because it would lower crime. It just doesn't make sense. That's kind of intriguing to me that there's no bigger. There's like you just really like hit something that's not out. It's not talked about a lot. It's not out at the forefront.
Right. And I guess because they consider that nonviolent, and California kind of has different laws for violence and nonviolent. I mean, they, like the California Highway Patrol guys, they said this guy, he had $13 million worth of stolen freight in a warehouse. The guy got 8 years, served 1, got out on good behavior, and then shortly thereafter was out doing it again. And the guys were like, yeah, we got a report on this guy doing it like this. And they're like, that sounds just like, so-and-so. And then they looked him up, and sure enough, he just got out and there he is doing it again. So there's no real repercussions for these guys. So they're just, I mean, if for $13 million and serve 1 year, that's not that bad. Yeah. I mean, obviously that I wouldn't do it, but I can see the low risk, high reward.
That's crazy. Let me kind of move a little bit to the digital side, because that's another big component of fraud. And you said it before that fraud doesn't always look like a criminal. Sometimes it looks like a broker login. And you talked about a minute ago, hey, you shoot an email to the carrier. Carrier has no idea that it's not, DAT's password reset. It's, a link that's going to go into a phishing request. Break that down. How are scammers manipulating different platforms and digital tools to steal identities or even steal freight?
Yeah, really, if you're a small owner-operator and you have a squeaky clean record or just a little bit of things on there, you're not getting hit with freight guards and things like that. They want your MC. They want to pose as you. So you will be getting emails. I mean, even me, myself, I'm not even in logistics, but they want me to be able to get into my emails. So they're sending we call it spear phishing, where it's direct links that they're wanting these certain information from you. And so they'll pose as, like you said, DAT, they'll post as MyCarrierPortal, they'll pose as whoever they can. That's a normal thing for you to log into, saying, hey, reset your password. Or I know one back in the day was, hey, you have a bad DAT review, log in quickly and dispute it type thing. And you're like, oh my God, why do I have a bad DAT review? What's going on? And you go in not really thinking, because you're so kind of anxious about it. And kind of tips on that is to look at what the link is. Typically, it's a little bit different than an actual link, like on the web address, or even just going directly to that website. So let's say if it's MyCarrierPortal and it's a link to reset something, go to MyCarrierPortals directly, do the reset directly through us instead of through that. And even if you see something like that, it's best to just reset all your passwords that you have. If you're getting some sort of phishing attempt and you're like, oh man, I think something's happening, it's best just to reset everything, because who knows what they're already in. And then another thing is, if they do get into your email, they typically sit in there for a long time. I've seen it up to 6 months to a year. So on the email, so they'll sit inside the email addresses sometimes for 6 months to a year. And then they're living in the deleted folder. So they'll route, set up some things to just make it where it's auto deleted, and then they function in there. So they'll take freight on your behalf. They're in your email address living. So some good health to do would be, like, every 6 months, I would even say every 3 months, reset all your passwords and always go into your deleted file and see if there's anything in there that doesn't look right. Especially as a smaller, carrier, it's where they're really trying to hit the most.
I think you said something just a minute ago that was another big fact too. Like, not only should you as a small carrier be, identifying, you see the website that's in the link and really kind of just doing your own homework, but like on the email address alone, like make sure that you see who the true sender is, because you'll get those things like it might come from Amazon, it might come from DAT, you see them come from Truck Stop, where they're actually impersonating that actual company. And you see, because in the actual email, what they're able to do is change the first name and last name of the email sender, and they're able to say, hey, from truckstop.com. But then if you go to the email exactly where it's coming from, the domain in the email might be, Danielle at you think this is truckstop.com type, so like there's a, you have to be careful, because like they're getting smarter and smarter with it. And one of the biggest issues small carriers face is they're being impersonated or cloned, like you talked about, through the deleted item box. What's the fastest way for a carrier to find out that they've been compromised? And what is the first thing that they should do if they found out that they've been compromised?
Very first thing you should do is, I'll just kind of jump to that, but very first thing you should reset all your passwords, get into everything you can, and make sure that because a lot of times they're changing your phone number and your reset password information. So that's kind of their first thing. Really, to kind of have that proactive attempt, like I said, going into your email address, your deleted folder as often as possible, or really any folder within your email, just making sure like nothing's in there that shouldn't be. If you do get any type of phone calls from a different broker or shipper saying, hey, I see you're on this lane, instead of just being like, oh, no, that's not me, that is a clear sign that like, hey, there's people out there posing as you, and they're, maybe this broker just happened to make that phone call. But I've heard of carriers where they've gotten those calls, and they've got several of them. They're like, hey, that's not me. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you're the wrong number, when really somebody's in their email address living in there. So sometimes you'll get the phone call, and it's just knowing like, hey, that is a huge red sign. Somebody's posing as me. So there's that. And then I'm kind of jumping all over the place with your question, but like I said, once they're in there, you just need to reset everything and make sure that all your contact information's there, shut down as much as you can. You can even call DAT and tell them like, hey, my email's been compromised. Can you shut everything down for a minute while I get a hold of everything? I don't want them having any time in there. And we do that too at MyCarrierPortal, is you can get everything shut down so that you're not doing anything while you're able to have some time to have maybe an IT person look through everything. Because like I said, even if they're in your email address, they're in there. A lot of times they're even in your bank account. They're in, other things. So, and you may even get an email outside of a logistics company. It may be like your bank, or it could be, Amazon.com. Hey, you just placed an order, and you're like, what? I didn't place an order on it. And then you log in, there it is. So they're very clever with this. And in logistics and outside of logistics, it's kind of all over the place. But cybersecurity is a huge thing.
I think one of my favorite ones is when they'll send you something like, hey, here's an invoice. We're getting ready to deduct your bank account for $902 or whatever. Click here to make sure that you verify whatever. So there's so many creative ways when it comes down to it. And a lot of drivers believe that won't happen to me. What would you say to that mindset after what you've seen?
If you think it won't happen to you, that's who they're looking for. They want you. They want the ones that are thinking that, because they're not going to have the extra vigilant eye that's looking for this or looking for that. So if they haven't gotten to you yet, I'm sure they will. And it's not if, it's when.
The thing is that from the broker side, when we talk about accountability and prevention, when the broker side, when I look back at it, you think about the amount of like capacity and drivers that flooded the market in 2020. So I can see where you're overwhelmed from a broker standpoint, when it comes down to that. And here's the thing too, there's been a lot of finger pointing when fraud hits. And finger pointing, no accountability, there's a lot of finger pointing. Are brokers doing enough to vet carriers, or do you think that they're overdoing it when it comes to vetting carriers? Because you see some brokers, like, honestly, with the whole inspection thing, like, sometimes they overdo it because they don't understand, like, okay, what is an inspection? I've seen brokers tell a carrier, like, hey, you need to go to TA and pull up and make sure, you get in. I'm like, no, that's not the kind of inspection. You don't know what you're talking about type thing. Right. But, like, Do you think that there's an OD on it, or you think that they're not doing enough, or what do you think is really kind of driving it from a vetting standpoint?
I do think they're doing kind of too much on some things. Now, there are some people who are doing nothing, and I'm like, bless their heart. Like, I learn about them. I'm like, oh my God, I need to teach you all the things, like, Lord.
Right.
But I think at the end of the day, it's relationship. It's making an extra phone call, verifying, like just a simple extra phone call. You send a rate sheet, you call the FMCSA phone number and saying, hey, I just sent you this rate sheet for this lane to this lane. Did you get it? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Great. Moving on with your day. I mean, that simple phone call, I can't even tell you how many people that I know that do that on every single one and what they've stopped. So obviously a vetting platform I think is definitely needed, and you need that extra layer of protection. But at the end of the day, making that simple phone call or verifying like, hey, you're for sure a driver. You're not just one posing like one. And, is this your VIN number? Does it belong to you? And where are you? Like at the end of the day, that's kind of all you need to know. And I think they are getting way too in depth on things. And if there is some sort of red flag, you need to know how to vet further, not just say no. Like you mentioned with the inspection thing, having no inspections does not mean they're a bad guy. DOT even said themselves they're not doing extra inspections anymore. Unless your hood's flying off of your truck, that's when they're going to pull you over. Unfortunately, I had a driver like that. My shipper called me. And so that's really what they're looking for as far as inspection. So it's not the same as it was before. And so you need to update your vetting processes. And that's something that I'm huge on teaching, is it's more of a vetting process than just having tech. Tech's not going to save you. It can help you for sure, and it can make things faster, but it's not going to save you. It really takes that human element in there. Like I said, making that additional phone call or speaking to the driver, confirming that they're working where they're supposed to be working. Because a lot of times the drivers aren't in on it. Mm-hmm. A lot of times they are they're being double brokered and basically screwed over as well.
So if you had to, on the flip side, then what do small carriers need to be doing to protect their MC to avoid being used in a double brokering situation? Like, how do you can you really avoid that?
You definitely can. Other than cybersecurity health, like we talked about, the other thing would be if you receive a blind shipment or a rerouting call. Those are kind of the other two big tactics that they're using for carriers. So they will give you like a blind shipment and tell you, and unfortunately, this is a thing in our industry. I wish we had a different way of doing this because I hate this. It's so easy for them to convince you to go somewhere else. But regardless, on that paperwork, there should still be something that says, like the broker name, and then calling the actual broker name that the shipper lists and saying where the freight should go to, and they can confirm with you. There is some contact on there that can tell you the real point A to point B, even if it's a blind shipment. And then mid-transit too, if you try to get rerouted and things like that, you need to also do a little bit more verification on that. Either calling back the broker and verifying, hey, was this you that actually called me for the rerouting? Because I've even heard nowadays too that they're somehow finding out what driver's driving for what broker and rerouting them mid-shipment. It's like I said, it's wild how they can. It's crazy.
So you've built a platform teaching others how to spot red flags before it's too late. What's one or two signs that you said should immediately make someone stop and double check before booking a load?
Biggest thing is any contact information changes on FMCSA. I think it's a lot more than 60 days like we thought. I think now I would looking back about 6 months. And just seeing, because right now they're buying really good MCs and they are either if they do make changes like they're supposed to, they're doing that and sitting on those MCs for a long time. Or they're just, going to town kind of right away. But typically they're waiting for a while because those are some main red indicators from, vetting companies, basically those 60 days. So they'll wait the 60 days and then kind of go to town there. But so double check who you're working with on that. And then the second thing I would say, other than making the phone call and doing the extra, human legwork, is to look at any type of lane history. So if you can see where they ran in the past, does this make sense with the lane I'm running? Like if you're noticing all their lane history pattern is all Southeast freight, and then all of a sudden they're wanting a California to New York, that's totally outside of their normal history. That should be spidey senses and red flag alert, what's going on. So that should be one thing. And those are kind of red flags as a broker. And then as a carrier, if you're getting told, a lot of rerouting, if you're getting told to pull up to another you're pulling up in the middle of the street and delivering to a U-Haul, and because that happens. And I've even known carriers or drivers that will video and be like, I don't feel comfortable with this. And you're like, yeah, that's a big red flag. I mean, it at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt you for calling, let's say the authorities and saying, hey, I think this person's trying to make me, commit cargo theft here. I need somebody to come out here and verify what's going on. They're not going to, punish you for being overly, proactive in that way. So, it's a lot of it's kind of just obvious things, but it's doing that extra checking and not letting go on just because it's a hard load to cover or just because it's 4:00 on a Friday and you want to get
you're ready to go home. You talked about raising standards and how we onboard and vet carriers earlier. Like, what do you think is the collaboration that needs to happen between brokers, shippers, and carriers that can move the needle?
Well, shippers on that front, I think there's a lot of educational pieces that need to be made aware to shippers. So if you're a broker or carrier that has a great relationship with your shipper, there needs to be a lot of education to shippers. Really, they are the front lines. Mm-hmm. And because they kind of take the responsibility off of themselves and push it onto a carrier or broker, because if something does happen, they end up forking out the bill. That's kind of where frontline wise, they need to be educated on what they should be looking for, who, whenever they're loading a truck, who they're talking to. And unfortunately, we're dealing with dock workers that make minimum wage. They don't really care. But it's part of a culture health. And maybe even as a shipper, I've heard of some that have really great success that they actually give some like incentives to their dock workers. If they catch a bad actor at the thing and they stop shipping them, then they get rewarded somehow, maybe like a $25 gift card or something like that, just some sort of incentive program. And I think that's kind of, that incentive program, I think, is a good initiative throughout any company, whether you're like, a small company or bigger. If you're doing like a vetting process or you do catch a bad actor or something like that, kind of giving a little bit of like, hey, good job, instead of, hey, you didn't do this, so, this is terrible. Because as a human, as we all kind of know, we're going to do what we're celebrated on.
100%.
So I think that's a good way to kind of make this be part of your process and everybody follow it, not just like, oh my God, I got to do this extra step and this step and it slows down my day. As in, no, actually, this is a fun part of my job. I can be rewarded and incentivized for it.
So when you think about small fleets that are already drowning in work, fighting fraud, can sometimes be impossible for them. What would be your advice to make that prevention realistic without it becoming another full-time job?
I think really the biggest thing is kind of going back to that human element again, making that phone call, verifying this is the freight. And yes, it does take a little bit extra time to do it, but at the end of the day, that could save you X amount of dollars on a claim. It could save you your reputation being tarnished because they think you're in on it and really you're a good guy.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it is that extra step. And I think because we've gotten so reliant on technology, that used to be a normal thing. We used to make these phone calls, no worries. And wasn't slowing anybody down, But now with tech, we've kind of avoided all of that. And it's just kind of getting back to our roots of what we've been doing and making that phone call.
And finally, my last question for you. When you think about it, you've been on both sides. You've been on the broker's hustle, the driver's grind. What's one thing that each side could do differently tomorrow to make this industry safer and more honest from your perspective?
From my perspective would be just if you see something, say something type thing. And as stupid as that sounds, but as a driver, if you're feeling something weird's going on, call your broker and find out, call the shipper and find out. I mean, if you're feeling something's off, and even as a broker, if you're feeling like this is a weird conversation with this carrier, like it just doesn't seem right, he's giving information too fast or too slow, it's off, right? Because we're dealing with phone calls all day long. We know if you're feeling something weird, something's off. That, and then I think secondly is education. So if you know about it, talk about it with anybody else you have in the logistics industry, share, podcasts like this, for instance, and education on shippers, brokers, carriers, whoever the more information we can share with each other and kind of educate, I think that is the way that we can make a difference and make this hopefully slow down.
I agree with that. And I think that too, I think shippers would benefit a lot from attending conferences, but they're afraid to just getting inundated with people trying to just solicit them for business. You know what I mean? It's almost like a bunch of, sharks that are feeding on them. So I would love to see that divide close at some point. If that because you said it. You just said it. You're like, they're the eyes on the ground. They're like the first line of defense when it comes down to it. They see the truck that just backed up to the dock that, dude, that's not the MC that I booked that load got booked on. So they see it, right? So they see all of the things that are happening, and I appreciate you for what you do on your platform and really the approach that you take in terms of protecting fraud. So I definitely want to just thank you for doing that. And Danielle, that was powerful, and I appreciate you pulling back the curtain on what's really happening. That was really, really interesting. I learned a lot on there because fraud isn't just a paperwork issue. It's a people issue, and it's hurting the small carriers who can least afford it. So to everybody's listening, you got to stay sharp. Just like she said, check the MC numbers, verify the details, and don't let a quick click cost you a week's pay. A big thanks again to Danielle Spinelli, the fraud girl, for joining us. Make sure you check out her show too, Tell Me Everything, and keep following the work that she's doing with MyCarrierPortal, because she's doing some amazing things, and I had the opportunity to kind of do a little bit of research and watch her do that. If this episode hit home, do me a favor, like, share, subscribe wherever you're listening, and jump on our newsletter by going to www.freightwavesplaybook.com for more breakdowns that help small carriers stay safe and stay profitable. This is The Long Haul. I'm Adam Wingfield. Stay alert, stay compliant, and keep your freight secure, just like the fraud girl just told you. Hope to see you on the next one. Take care. We enjoyed the show.